Hi, everyone. So, we are going live right now with SISociety, and this month's topic is death. So, we're hopping on with Death Doula Emily Jahnsen, who will be jumping on in a bit to dive into her line of work, which is a death doula. Here she is. So, as soon as she requests to join, we can hop on and get started. Grateful to have you here. We hop on every Wednesday and have live talks with leading minds around taboo topics to for your patients. Hello. Aloha. Great to see you. So as soon as Elfina hops on, we can get started.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here.
Grateful to have you here.
Get this.
Yeah. So, thanks for those of you who are joining. We're just going to get started in a minute as soon as Elfina jumps on. And again, we're joined today by Death Doula Emily Jahnsen to dive into the taboo topic of death, to really excavate what's there and see what's coming up for all of us. And I'm really excited to have the conversation with you. Yeah. Very much looking forward to it. I actually was feeling so triggered as soon as we decided the topic of the month. Like Erin had Afina had brought it up, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do it. Like, I don't. she was like, this is literally our work on the planet. Like, this is, it's going to stir up some things, and it's really quite an intense topic, and there's so much to unpack there. So I'm looking forward to it and to sitting with the discomfort and really seeing what's underneath it.
Hello,
so, there she is. Hi, love. Hello. Okay, beautiful.
Hi, Elfina.
Hi, gorgeous. And you just rainbow getting frequency.
Yeah, she really is glowing. I was just telling her how soon we decided to have the conversation around death, I started feeling really triggered and uncomfortable. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do it. I don't want this, like, because every time we have a topic, we're initiated into the topic, in a variety of ways. And yeah, I was definitely feeling resistance. So I'm looking forward to unpacking that today. And yeah, for those of you who are just joining, we are SISociety, Alfina and I, and it's a global community whose intention it is to transmute shadow into light through having conversations around taboo topics and really excavating and seeing what's there in the subconscious space in order to bring it to the conscious mind. And this month's topic is death. And we are joined today by the wonderful, the lovely Emily Jahnsen, who is a death doula and realized that she wanted to, and correct me if I'm wrong, you wanted to focus on end-of-life care as your grandmother was passing? Or
Yeah, it actually wasn't until I
wanted
experienced
to
it
do?
firsthand. And I was 28 years old at the time, which is actually rather early. Some people will go into their 60s before they're around anyone who's at their final stage. So I feel really blessed that I got that experience so early in my life because it drove my path.
Wow. Yeah, I think what's coming up around this is I'm just curious, like the concept of a death doula, this is the first time that I've heard of it. I've heard of a doula who ushers in new life with babies and mothers. And I can understand the general energetic concept of it, but I'd love to hear what your take is on it. And now you are a certified death doula, and this is like your dharmic
great
path
question.
and what you're focusing
so much
on. So what is that to you?
So yeah, I also, until I learned about this work, only had heard about the word doula in reference to birth doulas, and that they held the energetic space for a soul coming in. And so it just makes sense that there would be such a thing as an end-of-life doula. Some people really don't like the D word. A lot of people just don't even want to use the word death or dying. So you'll also hear this term as end-of-life doula. And it's that energetic space holding for the end, for the transition of the soul to leave in hopefully a really sweet way. than we currently are in our Western world.
So somebody like this process, I'm so curious about it. This
So
process looks like what? Like someone is um, like heading toward their transition, and then they call you to spend like a certain amount of time with them. Are you like physically there through the whole process? Are you guiding other people that are around them holding space? Like what does
well, I became certified through
that
Going with
whole
Grace.
structure look
So if you
like?
have not yet heard of Elua Arthur, I highly recommend watching her TED Talk and learning about her online. And Elua Arthur's Going with Grace program to become a certified death doula was 3 months, and it really actually taught me all the legalities and the logistics that could be really beneficial to have before they actually pass. So a lot of people don't know this, but if you don't get the papers signed before they leave, it is a lot of work for the family to go through, and they're grieving. So to be able to have all your ducks in a row and to have me help you take care of all those legalities is really beneficial and useful. And then there's also things that the doulas can do, such as legacy projects. So for instance, to give an example of a legacy project, maybe writing a letter to your granddaughter on her graduation day, or to your grandson on the day of his firstborn child, and putting these notes in a bottle and labeling when they can open them, and having you live on in that way. So that helping people think about projects like these, or if they were an artist and they have so many art pieces, to help them get them to donate it to their favorite organization or something like that. So there's so many different ways. And then along with just the domestic duties, some elder people become hoarders, so helping clean the house and get that ready so that the family members can really just be the family and not have to do all the extra. And another big thing is that sometimes I might be hired by a client because they're ready to go, but their family doesn't want to use the D word. So I'm now in the room to help hold this conversation and get it going, so that the family, rather than, them keep saying, oh, you're going to heal from this, all that, finally helping them process the edges and accepting that their loved one is about to go. Or the other way around, their family might hire me because that elder man just keeps thinking he's going to fight this and he's not going to die, but he's clearly dying. And so to help him get through that is all the different many ways that I can be of service.
So multi, like you have to wear so many hats, from like almost being this therapist to being a lawyer, and everything. That's, yeah, and it's so interesting because when we come into the world and when we leave the world, it's such an important transition for the soul and the spirit. And I feel like we put so much emphasis on the birth and preparing for the birth. And I mean, a mother prepares 9 months in advance. They paint the baby's room. They are eating all the prenatal supplements, right? And when it comes to death, it's like, it's something I feel like so many people, we just, especially in the Western society, we don't want to talk about. We want to just push away. And if anything, we kind of like have this culture where we kind of just put people, displace them in these houses, in these centers, and then there's like this like shame around it, and yeah, and like it's just kind of, yeah, I would just love to hear you share around the difference and the importance of helping to really usher that soul in this new way, and how you've seen and how you feel that having a deeper state of awareness, compassion, love, acceptance around death is helping these souls transition in such a better way, in such a more integrated way, for them to go on into whatever happens after.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right, Alfina, about us pushing them under the rug. But just to give us some credit, it's not our fault. It's just the way evolution has really evolved. So if you think about it, before hospitals, only about a century ago, elders were always dying in the home. They were slowly dying as the babies were slowly coming up, and it was always in the village, right? And it wasn't until this Western medicine evolution that we've been able to, and then also the development of assisted living centers and nursing homes, that we've been able to get rid of them, if you will, and not see death in the way. But yes, people used to always die in the home, and that act of keeping a body can actually really help are the mind's metabolism of grief, which I learned that from Andrew Huberman's podcast on grief. I highly recommend anyone who's interested on grief is to watch Andrew Huberman's podcast on that. But just to be with a body and notice that it's no longer breathing, and even just a day. And a lot of people, again, it's not our fault, but we believe that, oh, it's contaminated and it's gross and we have to get away from it, or it's going to start to smell, and that's not true at all. In fact, if you just put 6 ice packs underneath the body, from behind the shoulders all the way to behind the knees, you can keep a body for over 24 hours without it starting to smell. And just having that person in the home still for other people to come visit, and let's not forget, other cultures definitely do this, bringing the community together to be with that body. Because also our Western culture is like, oh, Joe died, but really Joe's body died. So to remember that Joe is definitely not, and there's a channeled book I read talked about turning the word into a continuation day. So rather than the day they died or their death anniversary, their continuation day is the nicer way to say it. But yeah, sweet.
I love that. Yeah, it's like the Buddha in Buddhism, they talk about from birth to rebirth, right? Like there's no real discussion of death. And I know Elfina in the chat, you shared, I think Danny, and I forgot his last name, but he's died 4 times. And he's like, death does not exist. It's not real. And it was really fascinating to see his take and perspective on it. And yeah, what's coming up for me is this, like you being called to this line of work, which just is so important and so compassionate and so vast. And I imagine like has its like challenges, like what have you learned from
Such
it?
good
And like
questions. Thank you all so
what
much
is
for
death
these. I
to
love
you?
this so much. Well, what really comes up for me is the biggest edge for this line of work, which I learned from Elua Arthur, is that when my client inevitably asks me about my views on the afterlife, to not answer. Because it's not my death, it's theirs. And I do have all these different spiritual views, right? I go deep, I live in the rabbit hole. But it's not worth it to share all that with them if that's not where they're at. The real ask is to turn the question back on them and find out where they're at, with their level of consciousness, with their connection to source, and then walk them home at their pace. Exactly. Because
That's
as
really
much as you had
beautiful.
said,
Feel
and I agree with
compassionate
it, oh, there's no
them
such
where
thing
they
as
are.
death. For some people who don't know any different, like for the agnostics or for the atheists, that is an edge for me to have to meet them where they're at and put my views aside. And I just keep reminding myself it's not my death, it's theirs. It has been.
Wow, like what a grand level of space holding. Yeah. Like where you're really breathing and recognizing that this work, which it feels like, it doesn't even feel like the word work like really encompasses what you do. It's like this grand, beautiful mission. It's so much bigger than you, right? It's just like, wow, what an honor it must be to be there around such a sometimes tender, uncomfortable, and intense experience, such as like being there with a family who's experiencing a
I would love to
transition with
hear
somebody.
from you, Emily. I know we've talked about this like
Yeah.
before personally, but for people just who might just be coming on here and wondering how can I shift my perspective around death, like what are some tangible ways that you would advise people, or like that you've been working with people in order to do that?
Thank you so much for asking, Alfina. So here on Maui, I actually host monthly death dinners. So I learned this, and I've been using the book to hold the phone up, so I'll make it a little lower. There's a book called Let's Talk About Death Over Dinner, which is where I got the idea. And this man has hosted hundreds of dinner parties where you just talk about death. And the reason you have to plan it and invite people to the dinner party is so that they can mentally prepare. Because if you throw this on people, like we all know, it's kind of taboo in our culture. So to help them know what they're coming into is nice. And it helps people. And so I'm making sure that it's a diverse age container when I invite these people, about 6 to 9. And yeah, there's so many questions that I get from the book, such as how do we talk to children about death? Is there an excess of medical intervention at the end. Have you written your living will? If not, why? Just things to really ask people to think about. And I know that it also can bring a lot of fear, the fear of the unknown. And so for that, I actually offer which I learned from Elua Arthur, a guided transcendental dying meditation. So after we go deep on the 9 contemplations of death, which if you look these up, it's a famous 11th century Buddhist scholar has created the 9 contemplations, and I go deep into each one. And then I guide us through a visualization practice and the sensation practice of the body shutting down, completely stopping, all the way to decomposing and disintegrating. And then I bring you back to life. It's about a 45-minute experience. And I give you an eye mask, and I cocoon you in a blanket, and I'm soft and slow right there with you. So that, I think, is similar to exposure therapy in a way that it just gives us an experience, and I emphasize a lot of safety. So if anyone is ever feeling the edge and interested, I would love to offer that.
That sounds it sounds like an initiation into the underworld. Coming back to life. I'm really interested, like, how do you feel like people's experiences with that meditation? How do you feel like having that almost near-death experience in a way shifts someone's perception on death after going through that?
Well, my first testimonial was he said that now when he's on his last few breaths, he's going to remember hearing me say, "You are safe." And I was so honored by that. Yeah. So, but again, also every death is different. So what I describe in that guided meditation, I described the most natural form of death is the slow decomposition of the body shutting down. And by the way, for anyone who isn't familiar with end-of-life care, it often happens in plateaus. So this elder might be kicking it in her status quo for 20 years and then just happen to have a fall. And that hip injury now brought her down, but then she can plateau there for another 7 years before there's some little sickness. But then it really does start to happen quickly. I was so blessed by the last 3 weeks of being with my grandmother to see what it was like before they start napping longer than they're awake. So I think anyone who's worked in elder care knows a nap is fine, but when the nap becomes 8 to 10 hours, and then they're only awake for about an hour, and then another 8 to 10 hours, and then maybe only 45 minutes, that's when the real decline starts happening. We don't have to call it decline. That has a negative connotation. The acceleration into the journey finally starts to pick up its pace, and yeah, it's done in such a weird way in my view, and I would love to shift that in our culture in my lifetime.
Yeah, what are some of your, I love that you just spoke into that, like shifting things and shifting the perspectives around death. Like, what are some of your other missions or visions around shifting collective consciousness around the concept of death?
Shifting.
I'd love to hear some of those.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Such depth. Well, I mean, just on a personal note, I've had enough plant ceremonies where I have experienced that. And I set intentions where I've asked my cells to remind me of all my past lives. That was weird. I think all that I got from that journey was the experience of dying in millions of different lives, in different bodies, different earth suits, as bugs, animals, yada yada. But that's what the cells remember. And also I've done past life regressions, and that has been really profound. In fact, maybe that's something that's next on my list, is to become certified to be able to hold space for those. Because I think, wow, beautiful, this is just coming out of me, because that will absolutely help shift our culture around death when I've gotten to see just how many times I've lived and just what golden nuggets of the life story stuck in my subconscious to give me wisdom for this life. Oh, it was so profound, and I had such even more less of a fear around death, which in the end, I think that's the biggest fear, right? When people are scared about the climate or the food or whatever, at the end of it all boils down to the fear of death, I think. In my view, it feels like that. And so once we can eradicate that fear, there's literally nothing to be fearful of ever. But I know that the plant medicine journey is not for everyone every
Wow.
lifetime. So, disclaimer on that, I'm not advocating for that. If anything, yeah, it has been a pipe dream of mine to merge psychedelic medicine with end of life care, and it's already started. So to
Mm-hmm.
jump on that train would be really empowering. But still, with the awareness that it's not for everybody every lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, just to piggyback off of the plant medicine with the end of the
Yeah.
lifetime, um, yeah, I just remember reading numerous studies about using psilocybin with terminally ill cancer patients who are like in their last, year or a few years of life, and how like just one treatment or one experience with the medicine was able to help them transition with so much more trust and ease and surrender and peace. And yeah, it seems like maybe something that is experienced or released, like that DMT compound that's released during different psychedelic experiences, could help prepare someone for that same experience of that DMT release when we do cross over. And so maybe by showing them the way of like, oh, it's really not as scary as it kind of takes away that fear. And so when the fear is removed, right, like anything we're scared of, anything we don't know, that we can tend to be scared of. So then when you have a similar experience, it maybe demystifies and helps us to welcome that experience more and unveil the fear that maybe is lying underneath that, which you talked about numerous times. Like, I feel like so much of the taboo around death is rooted in fear.
And also, one thing just to add to that, now that I've really been thinking about what I've noticed people seem to be dealing with at the end of their life. Yes, it might be fairly unknown, and that's subjective based off their relationship to source,
Mm-hmm.
but also not feeling finished.
Mm.
And it's just a deep one that I can't mend. I hold space for it, but I can't, so basically just accepting that your life is over, but you're not dead yet. And it's hard for some to be there. So that's when honestly silence is the best thing I can do for them,
Mm.
and just be there, be present for them, because yeah, if they and another thing is that there's a difference between pain and suffering. So pain of the disease or the illness that's causing death, it might is very valid, right? It might be I'm not in their body to know, but I try to help them differentiate if they're actually physically in pain and want more morphine because their body hurts, or if they're suffering and it's emotional pain because they still need to talk to their adult daughter who they have who went estranged. And so then I try to get her on the phone and try to make these things happen so that the person can die with ease rather than just numbing themselves to death, literally.
Wow. I'm so grateful that there's people like you that are really just like being this ambassador for this new way of tending to a soul as it passes. And I mean, I just had a recent experience, and it wasn't with a person passing on me, but it was with an animal, a cat, a little tiny kitten, and I literally held it as it had its last breath. And I actually had an experience where it, I swear it died, and it was like gasping, and I felt its spirit leave. And then it came back to life. And then, like a couple of hours later, it was really sick. It actually passed. But the difference is that the first time that I witnessed it pass, it was in excruciating, like suffering and pain, and it didn't feel at ease. It didn't feel at peace. It didn't feel safe. And like the death that I witnessed in that was so traumatic versus hours later we had tended to this cat. We were just filling it with so much love. We're like, you're safe, you can pass, like sprinkling it with like, sacred water, finding it in a comfortable like nestled tree, like wrapping it in a warm scarf. And then the way that the difference that it passed then was like day and night. And it was just like a glimpse of like, if we could have this same interaction with everyone as they pass to make sure that they feel safe and they feel loved. Of course, it's not going to be possible with every death, but with a lot of deaths, it is more possible than we think it is. And just how much that shifted that soul's transition into their next life, perhaps alleviating a lot of karma and suffering that they would be taking in because of how they died. it was just like a really like eye-opening experience for me. So I'd love to hear what you think about that and what your experiences with that have been.
Oh, I'm so glad that you got that experience, Alfina. And different earth suit, but same breath, right? That's breathing the life into the body. So I'm glad that you were able to hold space for the end of life and help that transition. It's so beautiful. Oh, and I've, actually, since I've come on this path, since my grandmother in 2018, I always knew this would be my path. I just never knew exactly when. And I've had so many instances from bugs to little animals come to me at the end of their life and be able to hold space in that way and just be accepting of where they're at on their journey and not trying to keep them alive. Because again, that's what I think a lot of our loved ones might do. And yeah, it's so deep. It can bring such torment, these hearts. But also a quote that I just learned from Bodhi B, who is Maui's own owner of the Death Store on Maui. If anyone's never been, it's called The Doorway into Light. I highly recommend going on a Saturday from 10 to 2 is when they're open. They're an eco funeral home, so no embalming. They are really clean with the bodies. And Bodhi, I just took a course with him it was titled Facing Death, Nourishing Life. Yeah, such a good course. And one of my favorite quotes from him is that grief is the twin of love. So the deeper we love anyone, the deeper we will grieve. It's the divine dichotomy.
That reminds me of what Heather and I have been saying is like life and death as lovers. And the more that you can surrender and find the beauty in death and in all ways that things are dying, our cells are constantly dying and regenerating. And, the leaves are falling from the trees and relationships are shifting all the time. It's like then the more that we can really be nourished and fully alive and fully present. Like when I know something's gonna end, like I'm moving or I'm traveling, I'm so much more present and in my aliveness.
And that's why I love what I'm doing as a role in the world, because it has brought death into my awareness with every person I interact with, every night that I go to sleep. And not only did I not die today, but I'm still intact. I am so grateful. I am always just giving such praise to God as I fall asleep that I made another day. And then I wake up feeling brand new again, because I really am. And we always think that we'll just wake up, but sometimes there are cases where very seemingly healthy people, just the body, things happen. So it is such a blessing to go to bed intact and to wake up anew. And it really is on the forefront of my everyday life. And I'm grateful for that, because it helps me have so much presence in my life every day, every moment, because we don't know when it's going to end.
Wow. Yeah, feeling that radical gratitude and yeah, shifting the perspective from like fearing death to fearing not fully living, right? Like that really feels so resonant in my body right now. And it's like what I'm experiencing through all of these shares is like the suffering comes up when we really resist what is, right? And that shows up everywhere in our life. And I imagine particularly at the end of someone's cycle, and to like radically accept and surrender and soften to the process really eases the transition like you experienced with the kitten. And I had this really profound experience that shifted my perspective on death, because I grew up in an Italian household, and whenever there was a death, it was really dramatic. Oh my God, why are they leaving? Let's hold on to them. Let's like, let's heal them. Like there was just this gripping and attachment to really hold on as long as possible. And then when something left, this like deep, really vast grieving experience, which is, everyone's experience is so different, no judgment, but it's just, that was my perspective. And I was living in LA at the time, and I had an Uber driver, and I always became friends with the Uber driver. And this guy and I were talking and, just having a casual chat, and we became friends. And he was like, oh, I'll help you get a car. And I was like, great. I was like, let's exchange numbers, and I'll reach out to you in a few months, like once I save the money. He's like, oh no, I actually won't be here then. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? And he was like, well, I'm terminally ill, and I'm going to be like leaving this world in a couple months. And I like started feeling so uncomfortable. My like body shut down, because, the way that this was handled in my household was like, oh my God, like so sorry for you. And then he was like, I'm so excited. He was like, I'm so excited. I've lived such a beautiful life, and I'm so excited for an upgrade. And I was like, just sitting in the back having this existential crisis, being like, everything I knew about death is crumbling. It's all falling to the ground. And he was like, yeah, he's like, I've loved, I've lived, I've lost, I've done it all. And I am really amped to like see what else is out there. And I was like, oh my God, like rather than, experiencing this resistance towards death, he was welcoming it and celebrating it with open arms. And it just was so deeply moving. So, anyway, I feel like what I'm experiencing in you and your line of work feels really similar to that, like compassionate, celebratory, loving, like radically honest and
Thank
compassionate.
you so
And
much for
yeah,
seeing me,
anyway, I'm just
sister.
really grateful
And
that
I
you're
do, I have those
on the
feelings
planet.
as much as the Uber driver, yet I'm
Yeah.
also, I have to make sure that I am neutral in the space. And another thing I learned from Alua Arthur was soft back, or wait, strong back, soft front. So to come into the space to the family, because again, they might be more like your Italian family, right? And I don't resonate with their views because I'm thinking it's continuation day and they're about to get an upgrade, right? I totally resonate with that. But to just call in the unseen forces, my ancestors, their ancestors, everyone who's calling this co-creation together, and be strong from the get, right? From my entrance. And then soft front is to just be receptive to what's needed. Maybe just go do the dishes. Maybe feel into that conversation if that's ready to finally be had, or just basically, yeah, be receptive to the collective space, because it's different every time. I mean, if anyone who's experienced end of life, it can be very intense, yeah, like you had said. So I give that golden nugget for anyone who's doing this work just for a family member, right? You don't have to be certified to do this. If you have someone you love and they're about to die, and they don't have to be old. Again, this can happen to anyone. We really never know. So I also highly recommend having your homie, the one who knows your views, be your advanced health directive. Do either of you ladies know what that is?
No, please educate us.
Okay. So I highly recommend your living will, to have it planned out and what you want people to do with all your stuff, rather than having them try to figure it out while grieving you. I mean, I've planned out my whole funeral. Y'all are going to eat my favorite food and listen to my favorite music. and it's listed, so it's easy, and you can just follow the steps. And so the same goes also with, maybe they haven't died, maybe they just got into a car accident, and now they're in a coma or handicapped from the chest down, or whatever those things are. If you're not able to speak what you want to be done with your body, to have in these things get notarized, and you can have, I think, up to 3 people as your advanced health directives. And I don't really recommend it being your mom or someone who would want to keep you here forever, rather someone who agrees with your views on what you would want to happen to your body.
Wow, you're like really inspiring me, because I would never think to plan that. But you're totally right. Like I'd want like Heather or my brother to be the ones in charge of this. So for anyone listening, what would be the easiest way to do this?
So I'll show you. I have some right here, but you can get these. They're called the 5 Wishes at the Doorway into Light store. And then I'm also going to get a bunch from this organization, and I give them out at my death dinners. So this is where it tells you exactly who you want as, in this place it's called a healthcare agent. But then it even goes down to, yeah, what you want done with your belongings, like, and you can add in a little paper and staple it in there, because I have it all detailed. I want my journals burned. Those were for my future self, not for anyone else. And yeah, anything that you care about, whether it's your belongings, or if you want to be an organ donor, or if you really don't. There's a lot of people who don't want to be here handicapped. There's a lot of people who have had brand new lives in a handicapped body. That actually, honestly, still is my edge. As Alpina knows, I really love to dance, and I feel complete. I could die today, and I'm good. I'm not scared of death. I don't know if I really want to live in a, yeah. It's so heavy. We never know. That's the heaviest part, is not knowing how or when we'll die. For me, that seems to be the heaviest part.
And are you saying that with this particular sheet, then you would be able to say, like, I would want the plug pulled on me if I were handicapped? Is that all
Yes.
on here?
Yeah. So this 5 wishes thing actually says if it says the amount, if I'm in a coma, expected to never wake up, if I'm close to death, permanent and severe brain damage and not expected to recover, in another condition under which I do not wish to be kept alive. So you can even add like a little extra of anything that have happened to you. And honestly, I don't even want to be resuscitated personally. I feel like if I died before my time, well, it was my time. I'm not afraid of it. I don't need the Western medicine to resuscitate me. But the only actual way is if you tattoo DNR on your chest, which stands for do not resuscitate. So I could have the bracelet, I could have my notarized 5 wishes form, and if they pull me out of a car crash, they are gonna bring back to life. It's part of the requirements, unless they're about to do the thing and they see it. But I don't have any tattoos. I don't need any tattoos. I don't want to have that right there. But I mean, also even a lot of people want to give their body to science or have their body go places. But if they don't know the cause of your death, they have to do an autopsy. And then your body does not get to go to science, does not get to do a lot of things that you might have wanted to do. So we can have all these 5 wishes, but again, they're called wishes because it all depends on what happens when we die.
Wow, fascinating.
Wow. This is really touching because yeah, I feel so empowered by this conversation right now because I recently had a thought since we are diving into the topic of death for the month, you know, like these other thoughts have been coming into the space of my consciousness, and one of them was like, if I die, like who's going to handle my stuff? Like, is someone going to fly down to Mexico and like go through all my stuff? And it's like these new conversations that I can see I was resisting before because I'm like, oh, I'm going to like live, you know, I'm going to live until I'm older, but it's like truly like my soul is already, I believe, already decided like what it's going to leave, and I don't know when that is. Um, but these 5 wishes feel like such a beautiful thing to dive into, to start to really support those who are still living around you if something does happen, and allow their transition to be as soft and graceful and supported as possible. Yeah, so thank you for bringing that into the space of this conversation. And I'm definitely going to Google it and like write it out and do it because, you know, I was having conversation with my dad who's getting older, and he was sharing how he wants his funeral to be. And I like never really thought about that for me, you know, just because of my age. But because he's at that space in his life, he's like, this is what I want. This is what I don't want. I'm holding you accountable. Like, please make sure this happens. And I get to ask myself the same questions and hold people that I love and trust in my life accountable to
Yeah.
really hold space for that
And
transition for me
this is
when
all
it does
just like
happen.
bringing up so much beauty, like everything that you're
So,
saying, Heather and Emily, because it's just such a metaphor. Like when we're resisting something like death, it's like, what other parts of our life are we resisting the death in? Like, and when we can fully welcome and surrender to the ultimate death or transition or whatever we want to call it, I feel like that's just a ripple effect for like every other area of our life where we are resisting change, where we are resisting transformation, decay in order for something to be rebuilt and something new to fill that space. And for me, it's like, I feel like just by going and creating this 5 wish list, it's going to create so much more like joy, honestly, of like, wow, this is like so fun. And like, I get to like create this. It's like empowering. It feels empowering.
Yeah, you're absolutely planning your biggest party of your life.
Yep.
The one of your life that you'll be at from above, or however you want to look at it. But there are some really viral stories of people who have done some funny things for their funerals that they've planned out, such as someone plays a recording just as their coffin is going, the casket is going into the ground, and then you hear the knock, 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 and the guy, hey, I'm still in here, or whatever he does to just
Oh,
trick the whole group of people. And he's like, no, just kidding, I'm gone, but I'll see y'all in your dreams, or whatever he said in the audio clip. There's performances, a really
it's
beautiful,
so,
if you look up like a Oregon water ballet in this pond in Oregon, not pond, but like a water thing. One friend made all the outfits, and then all the friends did this choreography water ballet thing for their friend who had passed. But she planned it, and then they performed it after she died, when she was at her funeral. So yeah, there's just really, really beautiful ways that you can bring your own art and your expression, your soul into your death, into your celebration.
it's so beautiful. I feel like I'm going to go after this conversation and talk to my dad about like what he wants too, and like the people that I love. Like, hey, like, are you open to having me handle this for you? Like, what kind of music do you want playing? Because I know he just said he wanted a party. He's like, I don't want anyone, like, I don't want there to be a casket. I don't want like anyone like, you know, crying or getting too upset. I just want it to be a celebration. And I was like, okay, but we never really grounded into what that specifically looks like. And I feel like that would be such a touching and expansive conversation to have with him, because I am in Florida right now, spending time with him, and feels like the perfect opportunity to be like, hey, this is what I want, this is what you want, you know,
And
we can like
even writing your own
crisscross and
eulogy,
have that
just
conversation.
having your own words
Um,
of what your view of death is and where you think you went now, and sharing that with the room,
Oh,
having it,
I,
yeah. I think that part's the most empowering, so that you can give everyone your final word.
so if you've been listing so many good things, if you could like, for anyone that's just jumping on here and watching this video later on too, we're talking to Emily Jahnsen, and she's a death doula, and she's just providing so much, so many nuggets of wisdom and how we can really reconstruct the way we perceive death. And so my question is for anyone watching this who's like, okay, I want to tangibly take, you know, steps A, B, C, and D. What can I do today in order to change the way that my death is going to be handled? And so what I'm hearing is this, like, 5 wishes could be one step, right? Where we're like sharing where we want our possessions to go, what we want it done with our bodies, what type of celebration or maybe non-celebration we want to have at our funeral, who we want to be speaking on our behalf. And then also hearing this idea of writing our own eulogy, which is like, it's so beautiful. I'm definitely going to do that. And then even being like, do I want to read the eulogy?
Ooh,
And
yes.
I want to be played while this eulogy is being shared. Are there any other practical steps that you would advise people with what they can do to?
Yeah, thanks for that. Well, you mentioned those really good ones, and then also for the 5 wishes, when you're putting down your person, the one who will speak on your behalf if you can no longer speak, talking to that person, giving them a call, and I mean maybe asking first if they'd be willing, because it's kind of a big role, when they get faced with the question, and yeah, going deep with them, like, and you can get so detailed as, if I'm in a hospital, I want you to bring in a lamp so I don't have that fluorescent light overhead. I want soft, cool lighting. Like, you might be in a coma for 6 months, and that person now has to take care of you for 6 months in the hospital room, if that's what your desire is, unless you want the plug pulled. And then your friend has to fight your family, because they have to say, look, she wants the plug pulled. I know this. It's on paper. I have to do it now. Sorry, family. Shit gets tricky. Excuse my language. But yeah, like you said, Heather, having the compassion for this space, because it's going to be different with every person, is the biggest uh, part of the role, I do believe. But Alfina, what you talked about, so the other different nuggets, I mean, maybe throwing your own dinner party, just with a friend, just on a phone call, just talk about death, because there's so many things that we don't talk about. For instance, a lot of people don't know just how toxic the embalming process is, or just how much fumes go into the air from getting cremated. But at least on Maui, you can be buried at sea. That's a pretty green method. Your body can turn into coral. And there's a lot of 5 new states just came out with this really cool, it looks like a honeycomb thing, and you put the body into it and you pull it out a month later, and you just got a cubic yard of soil.
Wow.
It's like a pressure cooker of how they pretty much take your body, and then your family can have your soil to put you in the garden, and if they don't want
wow.
you can go to some nature reserve in that state.
Wait, I've heard something similar to this where it's like a tree pod or like a seed, and basically your body can be put inside of the tree pod, and then you're buried, like your matter is buried
Yep.
with
And
the
you can
seed
pick
that
the
ultimately
seed.
will grow into a
It's
tree
so
that can be
cool.
planted in your
Yeah,
family's
I'm planning on
backyard. I'm like,
grandma
that's so
Emmy
badass.
eating her apples, whatever seed you want to be, whatever tree you want to be, and that is a different company. But what a way to stay with it, right? A lot of people, they want to keep that person close, hence why we have their ashes on our altar. Or also another new thing is that you can get ashes put into tattoo ink and get that elder or that ancestor tattooed into your body. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I've heard about that one. That's pretty wild. Yeah, there's so many ways that we can, alternative ways that we can recycle ourselves. I'm just curious, like, what is the average cost of a traditional westernized funeral, and maybe more some, like the negatives of that, like you're saying with the fumes that are caused and the toxicity.
Well, I mean, those coffins, those modern day caskets, there's a statistics, I might be saying it wrong, but it's the length of the Golden Gate Bridge is what we bury. At least one length of the bridge is what we bury into the ground every year from the construction materials of the concrete and everything that we need. And then, of course, the body can't decompose and go back into the earth. It just becomes a soupy mess inside the coffin. We don't actually get to be given back to the earth. So that part's really sad. A lot of people don't know this kind of stuff, but maybe they, like their family line always believes in open caskets, right? But the embalming process, what that does is literally they drain all the blood, all the liquids out of your dead body, and then they pump you with all these chemicals that I can't pronounce that are not good for for a living body. They're put in the dead body to preserve it. But yeah, it's still decomposing. The pigment turns gray, and you don't look like you did when you were alive. Obviously, duh. But it's part of our culture right now to have open caskets, and so that's why they go through that embalming process. But all of your, oh my gosh, yeah, the fluids part. And again, some people view like, well, I'm not in that body, so it doesn't matter to me. There's a lot of different, I actually have a few books here. Can you all see them? There's a lot of different views on what happens.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like it's very environmentally friendly either, right? Like the embalming process in general, like these chemicals being like put into the air and ultimately into like the funeral home and people are breathing them in. I don't know. Like that's just what's coming through to me. Like I guess I'm really feeling into
Mhm.
how natural of a transition I desire for my body to have, you know, to really like go back to the earth. And I get to outline that through this concept of the five wishes and what I really
Yeah,
Absolutely.
desire. So
I'm
thank you
curious.
for bringing
Do you
that
have
to
any
the surface
idea
for me.
around like the average like cost
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
of
cost.
funeral?
Right. Thank you. Bringing me back. I want to say it's between $5,000 to $15,000 to $25,000 when you add up all the things. It's really heavy, and it doesn't have to be at the Bodhi B store, the Doorway into Light, the Death store. You can get a cardboard casket that your family can draw on, and the whole thing can become a canvas for you, and it very easily
Oh,
absorbs into the earth. There's also this really cool mushroom suit that you can get your
uh,
dead body put into a long sleeve suit that it's threaded with mycelium fibers, so your body turns into mushrooms, and the mushrooms take all your carbon. Because when you get burned, when you get cremated, all of the carbon in our body goes right into the earth with the smoke, and people think that you're getting the ashes, but what we call ashes are actually just your ground up bones. It's a little weird, but
Mm.
it's the way that yeah.
yeah. Resonant. I've thought about this. I don't
Right,
feel
in a
resonant
way, they're
with
so
the
quickly
is it
incinerating you. It is so
incineration?
hot
What is the
that there's
process
no
called? Like,
ash at all. You completely go into smoke, and all that's left are your bones. And then they grind up your bones, and that's what makes ashes.
oh,
Wow.
interesting. Yeah, I don't want that.
And
It's just
especially
such a clear
because
body
my
no.
personal
I
view that I
really
don't
love
give with
this. I'm
every
glad
client
we're
is
talking about
the
this.
whole 3 day thing. Like there was something about Jesus, but from what I've experienced with the bodies that have been around after they've died, and then an hour later when they're a little bit colder, I've never actually seen a body fully dead after 3 days. But what I've heard from Michelle, who works at the Doorway into Light, the death store, she works with bodies a lot more. There's definitely a process energetically. And my grandma, she actually told me this on my ayahuasca journey about how her chi energy or consciousness left the kidneys a lot slower than it left the heart, a lot slower than it left the pancreas, a lot, you know? So I really think that the energy fully leaves after the third day. And I didn't know any better, but I let hospice take her after only 50 minutes. She was probably still warm, totally was still warm. And I feel like it didn't give a good service to my aunt, who was the primary caregiver for many months, who I was just really supporting her. I didn't know any better, so she forgives me. She knows it's part of the path that drove me to where I'm at. So it's all for the divine orchestration. But when we know better, we do better. So thank you.
Oh, yeah, everything is an opportunity to take information away from, right? Like there's no right or wrong. There's just information gathered that we can integrate and bring us into the next situation. And it sounds like that was such a potent reminder of what works and what doesn't work for you moving forward. And it led you here, which I'm so grateful for. So we have about 5 more minutes before we're going to wrap up. And Alfina, I feel like you have one more question left, and I just want you to ask it. I can just like
thank you so much. I'm so glad we're all telepathic now. So before we wrap up, I'm just really curious, like from all the people who you've helped to usher last hours, last breaths on this realm, what is like the resounding wisdom from these people who are nearing death of what they wish that they would have done in their lives, or what advice they would give to somebody in order to live their most fulfilling and purposeful life?
Such a deep question. Thank you, Alfina. What really comes to me right away is the weight of regret and their wisdom, because they can't, it's too late for them maybe, and there's some of them, to relinquish that weight, and they die with it. And their biggest wisdom is to go on the trip, make the hard phone call, do all the things that you might be feeling like you're waiting out on doing for whatever reason. Do it, because by not doing it, you have the regret of not doing it, whether it's emotional with a person or an adventure or a passion to fulfill. Not doing it in this lifetime can be so heavy to die with.
Yeah, it's not the things that we did that we regret, it's the things that we didn't do.
Nailed it. Yeah. This has been such a beautiful conversation. Thank you both so much for having me. So grateful to help shift our culture out of the taboo, because it's not taboo. It's the most natural part of life is death. So I'm grateful that we're all waking up to it.
Yes. And for those of you who are just hopping on now, please take an opportunity to watch this full video. It will be available on SISociety, where every week we go live with different new paradigm leaders, and this has been just such a profound perspective shift conversation with Emily, from talking about all the ways that we can prepare for our death to all the ways we can celebrate this transition and really reframe the way that we are handling and holding this in our society.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah, my heart feels open. The wheels in my mind are turning, and I just feel just this resonance of gratitude for you and for this work and for this conversation, because I know like culturally for me and my family, we don't talk about death. And I know there are many cultures that do, and it's handled really differently. And I invite everyone, if you feel curious about this topic, to go and just see how other cultures and communities handle death, because it's often really beautiful and really opening. But this conversation for me is that it's like just a perspective shift and an opening. Like I'm seeing things from so many different angles right now. And Emily, I want to thank you so deeply. I want to thank those of you who joined us, and Alfina, thank you for being here and holding space. We are SISociety, and every week we go live and we excavate the shadow to bring it to light. And this month we're going to continue to be talking about death. So yeah, so happy to have you. And please, rewatch the live. There's a lot of really beautiful and profound information in there that came through today for all of us. And
and just for those of you who are curious to connect with Emily and the work that she does, the beautiful mission that she has, if you know someone who's you know, on the last end of their life, or you just yourself want to prepare with all the tools that she's been talking about, Emily, what would be the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. I would say if I'm tagged on here with Downstream Vibrations is my business name. So one word with the at Downstream Vibrations. And yeah, just send me a DM and we'll go from there. Thank you again, everyone who's so interested enough to have been watching this video and to go deep on that topic of death to live a more fulfilled life. I bow to you. Mahalo, ladies, for having me.
So I would love to also include in the link for this video, we'll include that the 5 wishes,
Okay.
a resource. So, oh,
It's windy out there.
made it through the whole video without the wind blowing me down. Yeah, so that they can connect with that and start their journey for themselves too.
Absolutely. I'll definitely send y'all that link to put that in the post.
Amazing.
Yeah. Thank you both for what you're
Thank
doing
you.
with this world
That was a
and shifting
beautiful,
our paradigm.
truly.
Uh,
That's that 5D. Get out of the taboo.
Thank you for showing us what an emanation of being so accepting and comfortable with death looks like. You have to be one of the most vibrant, alive people that I know, and it's just so beautiful that you're a doula. And it just shows me that really the more we go into death, the more we lean into the beauty and the surrender of that, the more alive that we become. Like you're the embodiment of that. So thank you for that.
I'll take the compliment. Thank you, sister. I appreciate you. I love y'all both so much. Mahalo.
For your time and energy today and your work on this planet. And wow, yeah, my heart is so full and singing right now. So thank you for bringing
It's an
more
honor.
life
Thank you. It's
into
so
my
nice to
day
meet
through
you,
this
Heather.
conversation of
And I'm
death.
sure I'll see you soon,
Thank you.
Alfina.
Yeah.
Aloha.
Everyone for
Aloha, everyone. Choo choo.
oh.